A British national accused of belonging to an Islamic State group cell that murdered hostages in Syria has been charged with a number of terrorism offenses. Aine has denied being part of the four-man IS cell nicknamed the Beatles because of their English accents. The 38-year-old has been remanded in police custody and is due to appear in court later. He was arrested after arriving on a flight from Turkey, where he'd been released from prison. For more on this, we can cross live to London and join Arise correspondent Lape Olarinoye. Lape, good to have you on Newsday. What more do we know about this Mr. Davis?
Good afternoon to you all. Well, what I can tell you, Cynthia, is that Mr. Davies began long before his arrest in Turkey, his criminal career, if you like. He was a known drug dealer as well as being charged with possession of a firearm. That's what initially landed him under the radar of the British police. Thereafter, it's said that he was radicalized and converted to Islam. And that's when he almost transitioned into what he is now being described as a terrorist that was quite active in Syria under the Islamic State. Now, before all of this began, he was married to a woman called Amal, who, in one way or the other, he managed to coerce into sending him some money over to Syria. And of course, that's when almost his tracking by the kind of international police began. Now, Mr. Davies is also known, as you rightly said there in your intro, as one of the Beatles, who are a terrorist cell that were known in Syria to basically attack and torture a lot of European and North American aid workers or anybody that was essentially supporting the West. He was part of this British converts known as the Beatles. They also had colloquial names known as Jihadi Paul, Jihadi John, who was killed in an airstrike, actually. But Mr. Davies was known as Jihadi Paul. And that's because, of course, of his connections to Britain. He was thereafter, of course, arrested back in 2015 and was sent to prison in Turkey for 6 years. Now, there are calls for him to be deported, which he is now, of course, being deported, and he will face a trial hearing here in the United Kingdom. His pre-trial, which is where he will plead whether he's guilty or not guilty, is set to begin on the 2nd of September. But those charges have come up again. So currently he's facing charges of terror, and he's also facing charges of possession of firearms.
Wow. And after spending over 6 years in that Turkish prison, what now will be the next proceedings for him under the UK justice system?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question you asked there, Howard, because, of course, he has completed his sentence that he did in Turkey, which is why he's been deported back here, because he's a British citizen. But he'll be facing a fresh new trial with a jury. And, of course, the British justice system have also said today, as a part of this report, that he will be entitled to a fair trial. So he will be tried again here under those fresh new charges because, of course, it's a separate jurisdiction. And so as a result of that, he will be given another sentence, or he could be acquitted depending on the outcome of the trial. So on the 2nd of September, he is said to be going to a pre-trial, like I said, where he will plead his case, whether he's guilty or not guilty. And of course, the trial will then begin thereafter. And then if he is guilty, he will get a sentence. Now, currently, he has only appeared at Westminster Magistrate Court, where he basically just came to address the court and state his name. He currently hasn't got an address, but he is being held on remand.
All right, you mentioned fair trial for him, but how long could he possibly face if found guilty?
Well, Aaron, currently he's facing, two charges. One is a possession of a firearm, the other being a terror offence. And both of those face quite hefty sentences if he is found guilty. Now, if we look at the terror one, which is, of course, quite the significant one in this case. He is potentially looking at a minimum, if he's found guilty, potentially a minimum of 14 years and the maximum of 25 years, which is considered here as a life sentence. So anywhere between that for the terror offences. For the firearm, if he's also found guilty of that, he will be given a sentence which will, depending on what the judge says, run concurrently. And of course, that could face anywhere again from 10 to a maximum of 20 as well. So, I mean, there are hefty sentences associated with these charges, but of course, it all depends on whether or not he's found guilty once that trial begins.
Arise correspondent Lape Olarinoye, thank you so much for joining us on